Well, first of all, I was supposed to stick to one side, and that's it. But I felt like I had time, so I just came back to touchdown, and it worked.
All right, this is the GamecocksGroup.com podcast, the official podcast of GamecocksGroup.com on Rivals. I'm Caleb, joined by Pauline and Alan to talk a little bit of South Carolina and Furman, and that was Lenore Sellers last night post-game, talking about his 50-ish yard touchdown pass to Tyshawn Russell, in which he kind of went off script a little bit and threw what I could only call an NFL quality throw. Really, both of the touchdown passes he threw last night were sort of NFL quality throws. The other back shoulder pass to get Nicholas Harbor his first touchdown of his Gamecock career as well. And I thought we'd start there. Like, obviously, we can get into the nitty gritty of the game. South Carolina started off a little slow, probably, lost the first quarter and a half or so, but then dominated from that point forward. A lot of that due to Spencer Rattler's near perfect night. But let's talk about the freshmen a little bit. So in the second half, really about halfway through the third quarter, South Carolina started rotating different guys in. We saw 5 different quarterbacks last night, including Lenore Sellers, who got 2 drives that ended in 2 touchdowns. We saw DJ Braswell. We saw Tyshawn Russell and Nicholas Harbor both with touchdown passes. We saw Desmond Umeozulu. We saw a lot of Pup Howard. We saw a lot of these names that we've been talking about. We saw Tree Babalade. And
I was going to say, those are the 2 that played before garbage time. Well, not quite garbage time, but those 2 played in the first half.
Yeah, they both got 2 series in the second quarter I thought they both looked pretty good. We can talk a little bit about some of the false starts and holding penalties. All 6 penalties on the offense last night were on the offensive line. But where do we want to start, Pauline? What were the vibes like in that second half while South Carolina was on their 5 straight touchdown drives or whatever it was at that point?
Well, whatever Shane said in the locker room during halftime definitely flipped a switch in their brain, but they were playing a little bit of messy football in the beginning, but once they got their groove back, they were able to put players like Lenoris in, and I personally am a big Lenoris fan. I think he deserved to be out there tonight to kind of prove everybody wrong. He kind of stated why he deserves to, be one of the better quarterbacks on our team, and that was one of my favorite to see. And then Nick Harbor, obviously, too. Everybody's been waiting for him to play, and then of course he comes out and scores a touchdown, and everyone's like, these freshmen are going crazy out here, and I loved seeing all of that.
I definitely think that kept the crowd engaged a little bit later than you normally would in a game like this too, because around the third quarter, South Carolina gets up by 20 some odd. I think it was 28 to 27 at that point. And you started rotating those guys in, and I didn't, at least on TV, I didn't notice a huge swath of people leaving until the last couple of drives in the fourth quarter. So
I think they wanted to see who was going to come out next.
That's kind of how I felt, honestly.
Me too.
I was supposed to be. Yeah, I was definitely supposed to be riding then, and I delayed a little bit because I was just so into what was happening on those few drives there. What about you, Alan? What did you notice from the freshmen last night?
We didn't even mention Jalen Kilgore, by the way, who started the game as a true freshman, and I thought played really well. Judge Collier, another one who played in the first half. I'm just looking at this chart now. Zabari Sandy played a little bit last night. Bakari Swain got in the game last night, and not just on special teams. They played snaps. That's what it's supposed to look like when you put 2 freshmen in the game. There's energy, there's excitement, there's flashing, I guess, kind of why you recruited those guys, right? That's just what you want it to look like. And they don't look, it's Furman. I'm not going to act like they're going to go to Athens next week and score 50 points, but that's the moment didn't look too big for those guys. I think, you have every right to be excited about them, especially Lenoris. The throw to Russell, that, good grief, man. You said it's an NFL throw. That's as good as any throw Spencer made last night. And I thought that was probably the best game Spencer's played as a college quarterback.
Yeah, we haven't even really gotten too deeply into that. Since Rattler had a 93% completion percentage last night. That's the best by a Gamecock quarterback since Connor Shaw went 20.
He was a celebrity starter last night, by the way.
Celebrity starter last night, yeah. But yeah, Connor Shaw in 20 of 21 versus Mizzou back in 2012. And yeah, Rattler nearly matched it. I mean, really had more attempts, obviously, than even that night. I thought the offensive line looked pretty good as far as protection goes. Again, all of these, everything that we're saying here should be the obvious caveat that you're playing an FCS team. But like we were talking about all week, this is not SC State, who won 3 games last year. This is not Eastern Northern Illinois, who won 1 game in 2021. This is a Furman team that was ranked number 6 in the FCS rankings. They're a dangerous team. You saw in the first half that they could be sort of dangerous, and I think South Carolina settled in, imposed their will, and had some fun last night, which was sorely needed after I guess the disappointment of week 1.
All right, I'm going to ask Pauline the question that I asked Shane. He said he didn't see it, but it's not that surprising because he's a head coach. There's a million things going on. Debo Williams said it did happen, and I know it did because I got someone sent me a picture. After Furman goes up 14-7, Boogie Huntley is on the sideline pretty much yelling at the defense to, for lack of a better term, get it together. Were you close enough to that?
Yeah, so he was getting a little fed up on the side.
Yeah,
I think it was because of the younger rookies taking place. I mean, he had to.
2 straight, but not 2 straight. It was 2 out of 3 Furman touchdown drives, and that's when I think Boogie kind of snapped.
Yeah, he was over it.
Yeah,
no,
it's interesting.
Were you close to that though?
I was over on the sideline, but yeah.
Definitely going to need some veteran players on this defense to step up. Sounds like Boogie Huntley took that role last night. We talked about how Nick Emenwari had kind of stepped up as an emotional leader, and then, obviously he's injured right now. We talked about Mo Kaba being one of the most veteran presences on this defense, and he's been hurt. It's kind of good to see some other guys step up and be that emotional leader. After, really even before that, Furman had 1 trick play that was a halfback pass that led to their first touchdown. Then they had 1 legitimate touchdown drive. It was I just had it
68-yard touchdown drive, 11 plays.
Yeah, 11 plays, 66 yards, took up 12 minutes. That was definitely their best drive of the night. And then after that, you saw punt, half, punt, interception, turnover on downs.
Xavier McLeod, another freshman we mentioned, had an interception.
I was gonna say he was another person that definitely took center stage last night.
Yeah, that's going to be key as that defensive line, which is strong on the interior, but obviously can always use more bodies to be rotating in there. Apparently, Xavier McLeod called his shot on that earlier.
He did say. TJ Sanders said that he said at breakfast he'd get an interception.
Yeah, so that's fun. Like I said, a lot of fun to go around last night. If we're getting into the actual details of the game, I do think that was pretty key. After Boogie Huntley made that impassioned speech, the defense really locked things down. And then if you want to really point out the key turning point for the offense, you score a touchdown with 43 seconds left before the half. Defense forces a 3 and out. Shane Beamer and the staff smartly use their timeouts there to get the ball back with 23 seconds left.
Yeah, 23.
And then you go on a 3-play, 75-yard drive in 20 seconds that ends in a Mega Blake touchdown. And that kind of felt like the dagger. I know Pauline said that whatever Beamer said at halftime may have been motivating. I think also just that exchange right before the half gives you a lot of confidence as you come back out of the half.
Me and a lot of other photographers, like from WLTX and other places, we left right before the crowd would come in for halftime, and we left with, I think, maybe 47 seconds on the clock.
After the touchdown, the first touchdown.
And so we were like, all right, this is good timing. We go, and then all of a sudden we're like hearing roaring outside of the stadium or from inside, and we're like, what just happened? Like, what could we have missed with whatever left on the clock. And all the other photographers were like, did you see that? Like, we're like, but yeah, no, it was crazy that they were able to pull another one out within the 23 seconds they had left on the clock.
I have so much credit to go around there. First of all, you got to credit your defense for getting it stopped that quick. I'm pulling up the sequence now because I think it was a 3rd and short where you actually get the stop. Yeah, I mean, there's a 3rd and 2. You get a 3rd and 2 stop. So that it's not possible without that. Credit the defense there. Credit Shane Beamer for the timeout usage. Credit Dowell Loggett for pushing the playbook. Credit Spencer Rattler for A, having clock awareness, and B, making a pretty ridiculous throw on that rollout to Leggett. Credit Leggett for getting downfield, getting down. Credit Omega Blake for getting to the corner of the end zone there. Again, clock awareness. There was 7 seconds on that play. I got to score or not do anything here. You don't have any in between with no timeouts. That was, I mean, Beamer said that is going to go on their instructional tapes of how to run a 2-minute drill. That was about as well as you could do that from everybody involved, coaching staff.
30-second drill.
Yeah, no, really. You can't do any better than that from everybody.
No, I agree. That's just how you would draw it up if everything was going to go perfect. Speaking of Xavier Leggett, let's give him a shout out. We haven't talked about him a ton yet. He had another big night. He finished with 6 catches for 118 yards and a touchdown. He had at least 2, including that touchdown and including that catch on that drive right before the half, where Rattler just kind of trusted him, threw it up, and he made the better move on the DB to fight for the ball and win that one-on-one battle. And that's something I think you've seen as a essential part of his game so far in these first 2 games this season. I think it's a mixture of him taking a step forward, Rattler building a rapport with him and trusting him by giving him those sorts of opportunities. And Alan, you can give me the exact numbers, but I know that he's already exceeded his yardage total for the last 2 seasons in the first 2 games of this year.
Yep. So through 2 games this season, I am pulling up the number right now. Xavier Leggett has 296 receiving yards. And the last 2 years, which he played every game but one, the last 2 years, he only had 230. So he's already having a career year through 2 games. We were talking about Juice Wells being the first 1,000-yard receiver since, I don't even know, we talked about it preseason. Is it Shi Smith, Farrah Cooper,
or
one of those 2?
Edwards?
Anyway,
around there.
It hasn't happened since 2014. I know that. And Leggett's already over a quarter of the way there, 2 games.
I want to say that, like, to your rapport point, it's very visible on the field that Spencer has built this relationship with Xavier that, like, he can be throwing these bomb throws into the middle of the field and he's able to, like, be confident that Xavier will be there for like be able to receive the catch, which, I mean, it's very important for a quarterback to have that type of trust within his wide receivers, and especially within the first 2 games we're seeing it. So,
and especially with Juice Wells still seemingly being hampered. Last night he had 1 catch for 5 yards. Perhaps he could have played a little bit more, played a bigger role, but I think they kind of pumped the brakes once the game was in hand with him, let him get a little bit more healthy because he's still been dealing with did we ever find out exactly what was a footed injury of some sort that he suffered in the preseason?
Yeah, and then Amarian Brown for the 2nd week in a row leaves early. Last week it was ribs. This week it's hamstring. At least according to Shane.
He went to the locker room on crutches, so that's definitely something to monitor.
He came out.
You're thin at wide receiver, which I guess there's a reason. And by the way, we haven't mentioned Luke Doty yet, who caught his first career touchdown. That gave you the lead midway through the 2nd quarter. Or no, that was the first touchdown late in the 2nd quarter to get that 2 touchdown sequence. You're thin there right now. There's no way around it. But Xavier Leggett's covering a lot of holes.
And you're right to begin with. That was the one to take the lead. Spencer Rattler rushed in the other one. I feel like this actually transitions pretty well. So every week at the beginning of the week, I do 5 questions for whatever game week. So 5 questions for Furman game week. One of the first questions I asked this week were, what other weapons will emerge on offense? Again, we have Juice Wells kind of hampered. We've seen Xavier Leggett stepped up in a big way that I feel like that's someone that you can sort of depend on. I feel like we got that question answered in a few ways tonight, though. Yeah, I think Luke Doty seems to be a part of the process. We saw Eddie Lewis for the first time after Marion Brown went down. He was returning punts. He also had
6 catches, 89 yards.
Yeah, so a nice solid game for the Memphis transfer there. We saw a little bit more from DeCarrion Joyner out of the backfield. Also, he caught 4 passes from 53 yards out of the backfield. And then, yeah, you did see some flashes from the freshmen, Tyshawn Russell and Nick Harbor. Oh, and Omega Blake, who scored a pretty key touchdown there right before the half. I don't know how much of Russell or Harbor we will see on a consistent basis at this point in the season, but it's kind of good to know that you have those guys waiting in the wings as well.
I think you're not short of weapons passing the ball. I think we kind of knew that going into this season, and maybe you thought it would look different. Maybe you thought more Juice, more AB, more Trey Knox, who he looks fine. That's another thing I wanted to get to is tight ends too. 1 catch for 15 last night. You got weapons. There's no way around it.
I think
yeah, go ahead.
I think the weapons, so to speak, are already pre-existing. But for example, DK Joyner, he has always been in the mix, so to speak, but we haven't really seen him pop off until like this season. I feel like his confidence level has allowed him to, unlock the secret.
They were comfortable throwing the ball to him last night. 4 catches, 53 yards. Yeah.
And I think same with I had another player in mind, but I can't think of it at the moment. But the confidence level is, I think, where that will like happen, where we will be able to have those weapons that we already have. We just need to develop the players a little bit more.
Yeah, let's talk running backs here for a second. So DeCarrion Joyner, a little bit better night last night, 11 attempts for 42 yards. All together, you had 11 rushers combined for 108 yards. Still not the greatest average yards per carry at 2.8. Granted, some of that sacks and stuff. But yeah, DeCarrion had 3.8 yards per carry. Mario Anderson, 6 rushes, 32 yards, 5.3. To me, he looked like the most natural-looking running back last night. I think he probably needs some more run, especially in obvious running situations. I do think DeCarrion Joyner is your best, like, all-around back, especially if you're going to be using backs out of the backfield for passing situations and stuff like we saw last night. But I do think, maybe Mario Anderson is kind of carving out his niche there.
Yeah, that would be my one negative from last night. I still am not convinced you can run the ball consistently. I mean, Joyner 11 for 42, but he had a 16-yard run in there. So you take that one chunk out, and you're at 10 for 28. It's less than 3 yards a carry. I'm not trying to throw cold water on it, but I'm still not fully convinced that you can have an effective running game. But also maybe you don't really need it as much with Spencer.
Let's talk about Rattler's first 2 weeks. He's 55 of 66 for 698 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. If he keeps playing like that, I don't know that you need a ton of a running game. But obviously, as we saw in week 1, you have to be able to protect him. You have to be able to take some pressure off. One other, note on that front that I wanted to mention. So you mentioned Trey Knox had 1 catch for 15 yards.
Yeah, I think we're going the same place.
Had 2 catches for 7 yards, but it did seem like they didn't run as many routes with the tight ends last night. They kind of kept them in protection, which, it worked. Rattler did not take any sacks last night after taking 9 the week before. Granted, again, defensive line for North Carolina is a lot better than the defensive line for Furman, but I still think just schematically that worked a lot better.
There were a lot of times last night where you're in 12 personnel. You've got Simon and Knox on one side of the formation. They're both splitting out pre-snap to the other just to block. Chipping. I thought Mario Anderson could block a little bit too from the running back spot. You saw a lot of those kind of different things to maybe mitigate the fact that your offensive line is not as talented as most of the defensive lines you're going to face, last night excluded. I think that you're going to have to do that most of the year. And that goes back to the wide receiver point that if Trey Knox and Josh Simon have to block, you need someone else to throw the ball to.
Definitely. If we go back to the questions from the beginning of the week, we've kind of talked a lot about the semblance of a running game. We just kind of hit on that. Who is healthy and who can step in? Like you said, you saw Kilgore take a little bit of a stinger or some sort of the play. He came down grabbing his knee, but then the replay didn't look too bad.
It was audible on the field. Like, it was audible.
I think he just got scared by whatever happened. Maybe something like sort of popped or tweaked or something. Because obviously he was back in there after one or two series. But yeah, that definitely looked scary. So Kilgore continued to have a good night. He led the team in tackles last night, filling in for him and Rory. Pup Howard got a good bit of rotation at linebacker last night. I think that's going to be pretty key going forward. He definitely looks the part. I saw maybe a little bit more hesitation from him than Debo Williams and Stone Bland as far as where those two guys, as soon as the ball is snapped, it seems like they know where they're going. Pup Howard maybe
I think it goes back to the confidence level, though, where
and that's something that's going to
scary moments.
Yeah, that's something that's going to improve because that's the same note that I would have given Stone Bland last year, and he's obviously come a long way.
He was somebody the past two games that I have definitely seen become a key player in our lineups, and he's been doing really well. I don't know.
I think you're in depth-wise, you're still asking questions, but at linebacker, you're in very good shape with Stone and Debo.
Any other injury notes from last night, Alan, that Shane Beamer shared after the game?
Yeah, so Keenan Nelson Jr. got banged up last night. I am pulling it up now. That was the other one in game, which means you're down to a third string nickel now because David Spalding didn't play last night either. Keenan Nelson got hurt in the game, said upper body. Beamer said he should be fine. Going to depth, John Darius Morgan, who was one of those young offensive linemen who got in late, he fell on his wrist. They're not sure about it. And I don't think a lot of people caught this, but Bradley Dunn, again, that's like your fourth or fifth running back, but Bradley Dunn was on crutches last night, got hurt before the game or in practice. It was before the game. So don't know the deal is there yet, but I think you came out of last night pretty okay as far as new injuries go. The one scare was Kilgore and Keenan Nelson you have to check on, but I think other than that, you're in pretty okay shape compared to where you were before the game.
Also, just a really quick note, I saw Stats Award, who I follow on Twitter, just posted the SEC QBRs for week 2. Spencer Rattler, number 1, as you might expect. Jaden Daniels from LSU, number 2. Then you got Will Rogers, Connor Wegman down. And then some guys that, obviously got picked ahead of Rattler at the beginning of the season. Jackson Dart down in the middle, KJ Jefferson down in the middle. Joe Milton down near the bottom, Devin Leary down near the bottom, through 2 weeks at least. And obviously the level of competition is about to take a big step up. Spencer Rattler has definitely looked like one of, if not the best quarterback in the SEC thus far.
Yeah, no way around it. He looks great. He's validating everything we kind of thought about it before the season. And no turnovers is the thing for me. I mean, at this point last year, what did he already have? 3 picks, 4 picks?
Yeah, I mean, at least I feel like he might have thrown 3.
2 against Georgia State, and I think 1 against Arkansas.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get back to those 5 questions, and then the last question is what I think we'll spend a little bit of time on here. So, second to last question: can you contain the quarterback? Tyler Huff did have a couple of moments where he escaped the pocket, made something happen with his legs. But overall, you leave him at 8 rush attempts for 15 yards. You finish the game with 3 sacks.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Siri talking to me. You finished the game with 3 sacks against Tyler Huff, your first sack of the season, obviously, and force him into an interception and a below 60% completion percentage. How are you feeling on containing the QB?
I think you feel better about it. I think, like I said, I thought Brian Thomas Jr. played well last night. He was kind of him and Strawn were your third down obvious passing situation. The guys, Strong got a sack last night. By the way, it's a year to the day, -1 from his ACL tear. That had to feel really good for him. You got some interior pressure too, honestly, which you didn't see at all last week. But TJ Sanders got through a couple times. Obviously, Xavier McLeod had the pick. Boogie, Tonka. I think again, FCS offensive line, I think you feel better about options there, and you just have to kind of live with the fact that some weeks it's probably not going to look great.
I don't think that should be the main thing at this point that focus all of our time on, especially just because of the fact that we did play Furman and their O-line isn't going to be the same as Georgia next week. So I don't expect that we would be able to get to the quarterback as much as we would this past game or against Georgia State or another team of the likes.
You're definitely going to have to be creative with your blitz packages next week, I think, and hope that you can kind of confuse Georgia.
This entire season is all about creativity.
And we'll get into it way more between now and next Saturday. I actually think if you can send the house and Carson back, you might be able to make some things happen next week.
He struggled a little bit early this past week against Ball State. But, yeah, obviously we'll talk a lot more about the game throughout the week this week. I think I give the pass rush a B-, I guess, for the game. I do think that moment that we've already talked about with Boogie Huntley kind of getting in everyone's face did sort of shift things. But even Shane Beamer said kind of early in the game, he was expecting more as far as the pressure went and was kind of.
I mean, you got no pressure in the first quarter, at all.
Yeah.
That's something Shane. I asked Shane about that post game. He said, "Yeah, you got no push, no pressure at all until it happened." And look, this doesn't mean you have to, have 5 sacks a game. That's A, not realistic, and B, that's not what you need. You just need pressure. You need to make the quarterback feel you're there. Hurries. There was one. I think it was TJ Sanders in the second quarter where he didn't get the sack, but he forced Huff out of the pocket on the third down and he had to throw the ball. That's as good as a sack. You force a punt with that. That's the same thing. You just need to have your presence there as much as actually finishing plays with sacks, I think.
I think that he was, because I saw him literally hands in his head, crouched on the sidelines. He was very frustrated at that.
He did miss that sack, but you got the field.
I think that he also, coming from a coaching perspective and just looking at our season, this is one of the very few opportunities that we get as a team throughout our entire game schedule to work out kinks and use it to our advantage. And I mean, last week, it's not the same team, but a lot of these veterans were making these mistakes. So this time around, we didn't see as many of those mistakes, but it wasn't up to the expectation. They weren't utilizing it to their full advantage, I guess. And that's
experimental game was the term Spencer Rattler used post game.
Yeah. And I guess on that point, this is probably still the biggest burning question as we head into SEC play. Is the O-line fixed? And obviously not fixed in the sense of now it's perfect. But we talked about last week, they just need to get to a point where it's average. You can't give up 9 sacks a game. You can't have a -2 yard rushing night. I guess I'll start there, and then I want to talk a little bit about an alignment that we saw in the second quarter and whether or not perhaps that's your best alignment, even if you're giving up something there. But what do we think about where the O-line sits after 2 games?
I think you feel better than you did last week just because your quarterback didn't get sacked 9 times. Protection was better. You saw some different guys get in there. It just looked cleaner. Penalties still a pretty big problem. I mean, if you got a hold to keep your quarterback clean against Furman, what are you going to look like next week? I would just say on that point, this is going to be, and I think this is where you're going with it next, but this is going to be a process. There's going to be weeks where it looks more like last week than last night. You're just going to have to live with that. You're going to have tight ends blocking. You're going to need running backs chipping. That's just what it's going to have to be for a little bit here. You do feel better about it, but I don't think you're fixed. No.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, we have such a small, all these new kids they're not as big and, rookie wise. And it's all just a learning experience for them. and it just is going to come with time, and they're going to learn the hard way. Unfortunately, most football players, I would assume, do, and it's all through their mistakes that they'll make on the field, take back, and improve upon. So we just have to wait and see.
Which I think is what Caleb's getting to next.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, 6 penalties last night, all on the offensive line. You had 3 false starts, 3 holdings. I think you're going to have to take your licks. But my question is, after watching last night, I'm going to have to rewatch it, see how everyone would grade out, look at the PFF grades, which we'll hopefully have later this week or in a day or two. And double check me, Alan, that this is the alignment that I saw. But I believe at one point in the second quarter, you had freshman Tree Babalade at left tackle.
Yep.
You had Nick Gargiulo at left guard beside him.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You had Bershawn Lee at center.
Mm-hmm.
You had freshman Trovon Ball at right guard. And then you had moved Ja'Kai Moore out to right tackle.
That's
I
what
think
you had.
that might be your best alignment from a talent perspective. But like Pauline just mentioned, those 2 freshmen are not quite physically ready, I don't think, for 100 snaps against the SEC D line. How much of it do you think you just take your licks with that? And also, do you even agree that that's your best alignment right now?
I do personally. Pauline might have a different. I think that's the best you looked last night.
I mean, so far, this is the best we've looked. And I think the whole coverage of like having the tight ends protected and not moving around as much, I think has also helped Spencer. He's struggled in the past with being able to make these split-second game decisions that, if the play doesn't work out as he thought, more often than not, he'll start you'll see the wheels turning in his head, like, what am I supposed to do? But it'll take too long for him to actually find somebody else on the field. With less distractions out on the field, I feel like he was able to, I don't know. I feel like that helped. That was one of the things that I noticed, at least setup wise.
Yeah, not having defenders in your face definitely.
My question, okay, I do think from a talent perspective, yes. I don't think you can watch what you watched last night and say that Tosin Babalade is not as good of a left tackle or better already than Jackson Hughes or Sidney Fugar. Do you want Tosin Babalade protecting Spencer Rattler's blind side in front of 92,000 people against the best D-line in the country next week?
But do you want one of those other guys too either?
That's the. I mean, that's what it's. That's the. Yeah.
You have to put someone there, right? Yeah, I think what you guys both just mentioned too about the max protect. I think you're going to see a lot of tight end help in the pass blocking game next week and probably going forward for a bit. I do think the emergence of Xavier Legette makes you feel pretty good about that. I do think if you can get Juice Wells back to 100%, you have both those guys as options on the outside. That makes you feel a little bit better. You're still, I mean, it's unfortunate because I do think Josh Simon and Trey Knox are mismatch nightmares for a lot of opposing linebackers. And perhaps could play a big role in the passing game if you didn't need them in there to block. But I think at this point, other than a play here or there where you try to sneak them out, that's going to have to be their role for a while.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I guess to go back to your question, yes, that's your best alignment. I think it's just one of those things. Coaching staff, I know, knows this. Fans have to accept it. If you're going to do that, if you're going to go with 2 true freshmen on your offensive line, okay, you're just going to have to live with some penalties. They're going to get beat a couple times. It's miscommunication. That's just going to happen. And if you're okay with that, if you develop that, that's you still think they give you a better chance against SEC defenses, that's fine. But it's not going to look like last night if you do that. But I still think it's going to look better.
Yeah, definitely. Any other notes that you wanted to mention on this game? I did want to talk a little bit about of some of what went on around the country and around the SEC as well.
My last little note is on Luke Doty playing 8 different positions, but he clearly is a tool for us, and being put in at, was he wide
receiver,
receiver.
quarterback.
Yeah, okay.
He was on kick, punt pressure. I think he might have been on kick return too.
Basically every single play.
Pretty much, yeah. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, but it's crazy how on the flip of a switch, he's doing another job. Like
someone post game was like, "Hey, you realize in your career now you've scored a passing touchdown, a receiving touchdown, a rushing touchdown. You got all of them.
Not many players."
And then someone else was like, "Hey, you can play defense, try to get a pick six." He's like, "No."
For what it's worth, I thought Doty looked pretty good in the one series. He got a quarterback as well. Some penalties.
2 penalties. That's
killed that drive. But I know it's a little too early to have this conversation. But assuming Rattler continues to have the season that he's having right now, he's probably off to the NFL or whatever after this season. I think Luke Doty very much felt like the heir apparent. But after seeing Lenora Sellers in action in the spring game and last night, it definitely – I mean, again, it's too early to talk about this, but it definitely feels like that's not necessarily a given. But – that might not be a bad thing if Doty continues to lean into the wide receiver thing and develop there. I think there's space for both of them. Like Shane Beamer said, Doty is a lead athlete that you have to get on the field.
Yes.
So it's just going to be interesting to see that going forward. But I think Lenora Sellers in his very, very early career is making a case that it's going to be tough to keep him off the field next season.
Yeah. That's about all I had on last night's game. We'll have more on the website. I'll have my stats thing tomorrow, and we'll start looking ahead to Georgia. We're talking about what happened to Alabama.
Yeah, I know you guys were at the stadium during some of these games. I actually got to watch a decent amount of some of them before South Carolina started. Obviously, most of the Bama game was going on simultaneously. Looking around the country, Bama gets beat by Texas. That's probably the biggest headline, although Colorado might be good. We can talk about that in a second too.
Miami.
But
Miami blowing out Texas. I watched some of that before the game started. South Carolina game started.
NC State was super close. I really wanted them to win.
3 quarters, yeah.
They weren't.
Do we think this is a reflection on this being the end of the Saban era? Also, real quick Gamecock note. 2 Gamecock notes. Alan has one too. But Daniel Hill was at that game. In fact, a bunch of recruits were at that game. So, maybe that helps you a little bit that Bama lost one of their first
local angle, right?
You said that was their worst home loss since South Carolina, right?
That is the largest Alabama home loss since 2004 when a Lou Holt, South Carolina, with Savell Newton at quarterback, beat them by 17 there. I think that's a Dennis Franchione coached Alabama team, which kind of tells what you need to know, but still.
So, is this a reflection on Nick Saban the Nick Saban era ending, or is this the Steve Sarkisian era beginning at Texas?
No, I don't want to do the Bama's dead thing. I don't want to do that.
I agree, but also there are so many of these new schools that are just like TCU last year, out of nowhere, just decided to become a very valid program and ended up going all the way to the fourth or the semifinals of. Yeah.
And Texas has been recruiting a lot better than TCU over the past 3 years. So
here's what I would say on Alabama. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say getting out of no, never mind. I was just going to say the conference realignments of everything is definitely shifting their competition and who they are ultimately having to play in the first place. So, and it's also, isn't it their last?
This is their best shot now.
Yeah.
They're definitely set up with the easiest schedule they're going to have for a while, and they got past the hardest game part of it. Yeah.
No, I don't think Alabama's dead. I'm not gonna do that. This is and no disrespect to Jalen Milroe, I still think he's pretty good, but this is the worst Alabama's quarterback situation has been in almost a decade. You don't have an NFL starter at quarterback. Bryce Young, Mac Jones, Jalen Hurts. You don't have one of those guys there, and I think you're just that drop off alone is enough to take you from here, from a national title contender to being a 10-2, 9-3 team. I think
Yeah, in today's environment
Yeah,
too, I
for
think,
sure.
like, because it seems like Bama is trying to do the bully ball sort of thing that they did, prior to all those quarterbacks that you were talking
I don't
about, and
think
it
you can do
worked a
that
lot
anymore.
better before. I agree. You have to score points, especially you're playing against a pretty good quarterback, Quinn Ewers, who had a really nice game today last night. I don't know if you guys caught the highlights, but
I
had
saw
at least
some, yeah.
2 or 3 elite throws that kind of put them over the top there.
I wanted to get into some of the rest of the SEC East here because
Yeah.
nobody looked that good yesterday.
You're kind of not
SEC
living up to our
versus
standards.
ACC splits are not looking great.
So Georgia takes care of Ball State. Obviously, they're still the best team in the country. Tennessee in a 10-point game in the fourth quarter against a not very good FCS, Austin Peay, win by 17, get a late score there. Kentucky down in the second half to a 3-win FCS team, Eastern Kentucky. I think they won by 10. Missouri beats Middle Tennessee State by 4, 23-19. Florida beats McNeese State. Okay, fine. I still think they're very good. You saw Utah struggle yesterday too. Vanderbilt, which you don't know if they're great, but they started 2-0. They go on the road to lose by 16 yesterday. Is the East just bad? Not named Georgia?
We talked a little bit preseason about whether or not it was fair to just automatically annoy Joe Milton III as, there's going to be no drop-off or whatever. Well, through 2 games, there's been a little bit of a drop-off. Yesterday, he had a QBR of 36.3. Not ideal. Obviously, Georgia's Georgia. They scored 31 points in the second quarter after going into that second quarter tied. They're good.
This is a SEC East not named Georgia question.
But yeah,
toss it aside.
Everyone else, I definitely think if you're South Carolina, you are disappointed at how week 1 went, but you don't feel like many of your goals for the season are necessarily gone at this point. When you look around at how, not even just the East, but the SEC in general, outside of Georgia, and Georgia is
your two crossover opponents from the West, A&M, who Pauline mentioned, give up almost 50 points at Miami yesterday, and Mississippi State, who had a 14-point lead, lost it, ended up still winning in overtime against Arizona, but they forced 4 turnovers and still needed overtime to win yesterday at home against Arizona.
Yeah.
That's your next home game.
I know you mentioned it. Missouri wins by 4 points against a really bad Middle Tennessee State team. Vanderbilt gets beat by Wake Forest. Yeah, I think you're starting to feel more confident about the schedule. How are you feeling about that road game at Tennessee? It felt like it was almost on par with the road game at Georgia, and now it feels like there's definitely a difficulty step down, at least the way that everyone's played through 2 weeks.
I still wouldn't pick you to win it, but I don't think it's impossible. I'm interested we'll get into next week, but Tennessee at Florida next week. That's going to be Tennessee needing an answer, Florida needing a pulse. In the swamp, it's a night game. That's a very interesting, just test for Joe Milton more than anything. And also, can Florida show literally anything?
I definitely think it'll solidify their spot as well.
We haven't even mentioned LSU, which take care of Grambling yesterday, but they got blown out by Florida State since we didn't talk about that last week. And they go on the road to Mississippi State next week. Interesting game there too.
I don't know if Shane Beamer is rolling in his grave right now about Jaheim Bell, but he has been popping off at Florida State.
I don't think I'm just upset about it, but Jaheim Bell and Marshawn Lloyd both off to pretty good starts this year.
It helps that you brought in 2 tight ends that are pretty good, but let's say Jaheim Bell is finally getting utilized in a way that the previous offensive coordinator struggled with.
You mentioned Colorado. Should we get into the previous offensive coordinator?
Yeah, speaking of the previous offensive coordinator, how about Nebraska scoring a total of 24 points through 2 weeks? And
0 first half points.
It's not looking too good. I started off, I guess, the section with, is Colorado good? I still don't know that we necessarily have that answer, but they aren't bad.
They're better than I thought they would be. I still think the media coverage and the hype a little bit too much. Like they're a 6 or 7 win Pac-12 team probably. Can we just chill for a second? Like I don't need College Game Day there next week. I know I get the Dion thing, but
you don't think the expectations should be adjusted a little bit? You're still picking 6 or 7 wins?
I did adjust it. I had it at like 4 before the year.
See, I'm thinking more like 8 or 9 wins at this point.
Are you? Okay. I mean, here's the thing. They're going to play Colorado State next week. It's a bad Mountain West. They're going to win that. You've got Oregon and USC back-to-back weeks to end.
We'll find out a lot there. Yeah.
See, but this is where I think about the Oregon game, because we were talking about this earlier, but Oregon's very similar of a team to Colorado in the sense that like they've always been a football team, a football school, but they
shaky yesterday, by the way, on Oregon.
What'd you say?
I said shaky yesterday, by the way, which I think is what you're getting at.
But that's what I think it is. It's really luck of the draw, I think. Because they're both very. Maybe the media hype will even help.
I think that game's in Eugene, but
it is, and then USC comes to Colorado. But if you asked me 2 weeks ago, I'd say Colorado's getting blown out in both of those, and now I feel like it's at least possible they win one of those, just based on how everything's played out in the first 2 weeks. But obviously, we'll see. Oregon has a much better defense than anything Colorado's seen thus far. USC is going to be able to keep up with them offensively, no doubt.
Are we giving another Heisman to Caleb Williams? Holy smokes.
Yeah, what did they put on Stanford last night? I
49-3 at halftime, and then they just put everybody, but holy smokes.
It was fun to watch the in-game betting or whatever after the first quarter. I think they were up 35-0 5 minutes into the second quarter, and the line in game went to -56 or something like that. Speaking of betting, though, what does Vegas know? That stuff is crazy sometimes. So you mentioned Oregon struggling at Texas Tech.
They covered at the end.
Barely. It was a backdoor credit. They covered on a pick six as Texas Tech was trying to go down the field and win the game because Oregon had a 1-point lead. And then Utah and Arizona State. Is that who that was? Utah Baylor.
I watched that game. That was
a crazy game. I liked that game.
Utah made a quarterback change in the fourth quarter, and if they don't do that, they probably don't win.
Yeah, but again,
imagine playing on a 134-degree field. That's what they literally. That was the stat.
I saw that.
Oh, in Texas.
The coach's shoes were melting.
But yeah, if you go back and listen to our preview from Thursday, those were two games that I was like, I am taking the line here, but I feel like a sucker for taking the line because there's got to be something fishy going on, and Vegas is good at what they do. That's why they
in cahoots.
Yeah,
they have all those pretty lights and casinos out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other games you wanted to talk about from a national perspective? I thought Ole Miss Tulane was pretty interesting.
I watched a decent chunk of that.
Kind of pulled away on that one. We mentioned Miami, Texas A&M.
I should throw an Ole Miss caveat, by the way, on my SEC's not good. That's a quality win. You go on the road against Tulane, you beat them by 17. I know it was closer than that because they got a pick six late too to make that look. But that's a good win.
That was one of the games though. That was like it was not enjoyable to watch, but it was definitely there was stuff like it wasn't a slow moving.
It was entertaining. I watched most of that second half, during warm ups at Willie B on my computer. That was. Ole Miss is good. I'll throw another SEC team in there.
Ole Miss's defense actually.
Georgia,
which is
Ole Miss, number 2.
Maybe honestly,
yeah, maybe.
But yeah, so Texas A&M gets beat by Miami 48-33. Game felt closer than that for a lot of it, but then
they pulled away.
Who's Miami's quarterback?
Tyler Van Dyke.
Yeah, he really just kind of went off in the second half, threw 5 total touchdown passes, and
I feel like that was the common theme of the games this week. It was all too close until the second half until somebody decided.
I'm looking at the box now.
Texas A&M's allegedly, several $1 million defensive line did not get any pressure on Tyler Van Dyke.
Paying all this money for nothing.
By the way, special teams issues too for A&M. I see Miami ran a kickback for a touchdown.
Which is something that we saw in South Carolina's game.
Yep, sure did.
I was gonna say, yeah. If I remember
Tyler Van
correctly.
Dyke with 2 touchdown passes over 50 yards yesterday. A&M with a double-digit lead early, and then that didn't stick. I'm actually like learning some of this in real time because I only watched a little bit of this game.
Yeah.
Whew.
No, I think when you're looking at South Carolina's schedule now, once you get past that Tennessee game, things start to look a lot more manageable. But that is still very much assuming that you can get the offensive line to average level, which is.
I still think you need one more win between now and then. You can't go to that by 1-4. You got to find a way to squeak out one more to get there at 2-3.
We're gonna be taking like 1 step forward and 2 steps back this weekend because of the fact that we had a great kind of putting ourselves together, not average but better than last week, and then we're gonna be faced against these massive players that cannot even compare to ours. So I just feel like
Next week's
kind of
going to be what it's
nervous.
going to be. Like, you just got to – next week's going to be what it's going to be. That doesn't end your season. It doesn't end your goals. Like, as long as you
Our
don't –
kids run over.
that's the injury thing is the –
Yeah. I'm not a fan
That's
of
what I'm
moral
concerned.
victories, but I think that there's some room for moral victories this coming week.
I mean, not even that. Like,
Right.
I'm not saying you should be happy if you lose the football game next week. But, like, you don't – I don't think anybody's saying you're going to go to Athens and win. I don't think anybody's saying you're going to go 11-1 or 12-0 this year. Like, yeah, you're going to lose some games this year. You're going to take some lumps. If you get out of next week with no injuries and like you just, I don't know. Next week's going to be what it's going to be, and that's just you're going to have to live with that. Mississippi State.
I'm definitely nervous.
Mississippi State is the target now for what I think is a crucial game for your goals this season.
All right, we will talk more about the Georgia game on Thursday and throughout the week on GamecocksGroup.com. Until then, this has been Caleb, Pauline, and Alan with GamecocksGroup.com podcast. We'll see you.